Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
And is my screen visible?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay. We will start and we'll wait for two more minutes for people to join and then we'll start. Mm. Okay, so welcome to the first tutorial of the second week for the Wildlife Ecology course. As you all might know, this course is being taken by Dr. Ankur Awadhiya, and I am Gitika Agarwal. I'm a PhD scholar at uh, Center for Ecological Sciences in IISc Bangalore. I will be taking this tutorial, and I hope we can have an interactive session. And everybody, please stay active and please let's you know talk and discuss all of these concepts. And if anybody has a doubt, please stop me anywhere in the middle, and we can discuss that further. Should we start? Okay. So in this week, we have mostly seen that we discussed ecological structure. This module was about ecological structure, the various levels of organization, and we looked at biodiversity as well. So, what are the various levels of organization? Can anyone tell me? The levels of organization below and a single individual. Anybody? What are the various levels of organization that lead up to a single individual? Cells, tissue, organs, and organ systems. Very nice, Rinal. So, yes, exactly. But below cells also, we have a few things. We have subcellular organelles. And below that, okay, if you want to go further, so you start at an atom, which is the smallest part. And then these atoms come together, they form molecules, and then further macromolecules. These macromolecules come together, they form organelles, which perform certain specific tasks within a cell. And then these suborganelles, they come together, they form an entire cell. And here is where you see the first emergent property in the in life. So basically, all these non-living things, they come together and they form the first living thing, which is a cell. And now this cell could be a single cellular organism and form an organism in itself, or various cells can come together and along with the extracellular matrix, they form tissues, and these tissues perform specific functions, and different types of tissues come together in an organ which performs another specific function. For example, you take the stomach, it is the organ that takes in all the food, and the food is churned in the stomach and is mixed with all the different acids and hormones for digestive purposes, and eventually these organs build up the organ system, as Mineral said, and these leads to an organism. Now, what are the levels of organization after this that we mostly are concerned in when it comes to ecology? Anyone? What are the further levels of organization that start with an organism? Yes, first is the population, then community, individual, population, community, ecosystem, and what else? Biomes. Okay, very nice. So you all know this by now. So the different levels of organizations that we see are an individual. Here we see an individual, and these the individuals belonging to the same species that live in a same space, they form a population. Populations belonging to different species come together, they form a community. When you count the interactions that the community has with the abiotic environment around it, you form an ecosystem. Different ecosystems that share similar characteristics, they fall under a biome, and all these biomes together form the biosphere. Very nice. So moving forward, so you can study. So I would like to point out that ecology is studied at all these points of organization, all these levels of organization that we see around us. So the first level of ecology study, I would say, is the individual level of ecology. So can anybody tell me what all can you learn about an individual? Like What do you think ecologists study when it comes to an individual level? Behavior, very nice. We study the behavior of the particular individual, interactions with the surroundings. Yes. How is it interacting with its surroundings, with the other individuals belonging to the same species or belonging to a different species? What else? Energy flow in what sense? Within the individual or communication? Yes. Food habits? Yes. The role that the individual has? Very nice. So, yes, you have pretty much summarized. So, we basically look at the morphology of the individual. How is it adapted to that? Very nice, Rupesh, morphology and physiology. So, you look at how is that individual adapted to live in that particular environment and to utilize the resources that it is utilizing, and how is its physiology and behavior is also what we study as a part of the ecology. What are different animal personalities, and we also look at what does it eat, what where does it live, what are its predators, all these things. So can somebody tell me what is an animal personality? Like, do you have an idea of what we mean when we say animal personality? Prey, predator? Not really. Temperament? Okay, yeah, sort of. So yeah, temperament is sort of how you can call that. Animal personalities basically. So nowadays ecologists have found out that all these different individuals also have a, they differ from each other in their behavior. So as Om is saying, temperament, so you can see that some of these individuals will be very aggressive while others will be a little docile. Like these are called animal personalities, and how they differ. Some may be very, they eat fast, so they utilize the resource faster than other ones, so they are better at competing with other individuals for a particular resource. So these are some sort of animal personality things. Solitary or colonial, that would be on a species level, whether that species, those individuals in that species, they prefer a solitary habit lifestyle, or they prefer to stay in colonies. So in ants you will not see that. So basically, if you see the hornbill here, it is mostly solitary. So all the individuals belonging to the species of a grey hornbill, mostly you will find them solitary or with their pair, with their mating pair. But colonial, for example, termites or ants, you will always find them around a colony, in and around a colony. They will not really, like, you will not find ants that are belonging to the same species, but some of them are solitary, some of them are colonial. Okay. Okay. So then population ecology. So, what do we see in these three images, and what do you think we study when it comes to population ecology? Can you tell me what are these? Anyone? Yeah, I was just asking. Actually, I was just asking what are these? These are basically rose-ringed parakeets. It's a group of parakeets flying together. These are some rhesus macaques, and these are some elephants that you find together. But okay, yeah. So, what do we study when it comes to population ecology? Groups of different animals and birds, individuals of the same species in the same place. Yes, that is what a population is exactly. Individuals that belong to the same species that live in the same place, they can interbreed and they can produce fertile offsprings. This is the definition of a population. About the facts affecting the population of an organism. Facts in the sense what, and affecting what about the population. So can you elaborate on that, Laksha? Yeah, factors. Okay, the factors affecting the population, but like what about the population? Anyone? What do you study, or what do you think ecologists study when you're talking about a population? Survival, yes. Immigration, emigration, very nice, yes. Extinction, yes. So these would be some things, yes. So when you were talking about population ecology, a very big part of that is population dynamics. How is the, how is the population structure changing over time? How is the size of the population changing? And this is definitely affected by the immigration that is happening in the population, the emigration out of the population, birth and death rates, density of the population, exactly. And some other things that we look at would be, so yeah, we talked about the number of individuals that are present in a given area, the number of individuals in the population, population dynamics. How is that population interacting with the environment around itself or with the other organisms of different species? And how are the species, or how are the individuals within the population interacting with each other? So, do you find a hierarchy in the population? So, if there is a pack of wolves, do you think that there is, like we always think that there's an alpha male? But so, are there hierarchies within the population? Or if there is a cooperative breeding groups, how are these individuals interacting with each other? If there is a, say, a colony of ants, so how is the queen decided, and how are the workers interacting with the queen versus how are they interacting with each other? So all these interactions, which are called intraspecific interactions. So we study the interactions, we study the population dynamics, size of the population, how it changes over time, what are the factors that impact. So when you said factors, Laksha, what I was looking for is what are the factors that affect, the size of the population or the survival of the population, such things. So very nice. So this is what is population ecology mostly about. And then we come to species ecology. So how do you define a species and what do you think is species ecology? Interaction between biotic and abiotic. Not really. I'm just talking about a species ecology. Species is the basic unit of hierarchy. Okay. Yeah, but how do you define a species? Group of organisms capable of producing offsprings, individual species, and their interactions with the environment. Okay, so Afia is on the correct trajectory. Basically, species is defined as a group of organisms belonging to, they might belong to a same population or they might be different populations in different areas, and they are capable of interbreeding and producing offsprings that are viable and that are fertile. Those offsprings can survive and they can in turn produce viable offsprings. So they're capable of interbreeding, yes, or potentially interbreeding. Very nice. So, what do you think is species ecology? What do we look at when we talk about species ecology? Sorry, I by mistake revealed the answer now. So, okay, when we talk about species ecology, we're basically trying to understand anything and everything that is there about that species to know. So, when an ecologist is focusing on a particular species, they want to know everything about that species. Where is that species found? What are the resources that species is utilizing? Where are those resources found? If the species population is declining somewhere, what are the factors that it is declining? If it is thriving somewhere else, what are the factors that are affecting that and why is it thriving in those areas? And what can be done to, control for the population in different, for the species in different regions? What are the breeding behaviors of the species? What are the mating behaviors? So you would know that certain birds, they do these mating calls or they attract their mates, they have sexual selection. So what are the different mating behaviors that happen in that particular species, and how do they breed? What time of the year do they breed? How do they, divide their time during the day or during the year across different activities? If it's a migratory species, then you would like to know where does it come from, where does it go, why does it migrate, how does it decide its migratory trajectory, where it's going. And you would also, as some of you pointed out, you would also need to know about the interactions that the species has with other abiotic and biotic um, things around it. So here I have shown this house sparrow. This is a species that is widely distributed. It is native to it is found in Europe, in North Africa, and in Asia. You would have seen it if you are. Have you guys seen a house sparrow? And so these are the few things about the sparrow that are there, that it is, you can see it taking a dust or a water bath, and it's mostly, you can find it feeding on grains. It's a granivore, these things. So a lot of things, and there has been a decline in the numbers in the past decade. So these are the few things that uh, a scientist would like to know about a species when they are studying the ecology of that species, like everything that is present there, to know about it. Moving on to a community. So you all would know by now that what is a community. So what do you think that we look at when you are studying community ecology, or when we are looking at, a community and want to study what is happening there? Anyone, guys? What is community ecology, or like just tell me what you think is a community, and then we'll move on to what do we mean by studying the ecology of a community. Range distribution adaptation. Oh, sorry. How one species interact with the other. Okay. Yeah, different species populations present in a territory and their interactions between communities, population interaction, way of living. Okay, interactions between different species within a geographic area, group of species in some geographic area. Okay, very nice. You've all answered it almost correctly. So a community is basically, as you all said, it's a number of populations that belong to different species that are present in a particular area, in a territory, and they're present at the same time in that same area. And when you're talking about ecological studies of the community, we look at basically the interspecific interactions, which means the interactions between different species, individuals belonging to different species. And what else do we look at are the factors that will influence the biodiversity of the area, and the distribution and the abundance of different species in that community, and how is that community structured. So, which individuals are interacting with which other individuals. So, you all have answered it correctly. And coming to ecosystem, so we have many different types of ecosystems on this planet. We have tropical rainforests, we have temperate forests, we have deciduous forests, we have coniferous or taiga forests, we have grasslands, we have different types of grasslands, we have deserts, we have mountains, we have riverine ecosystems, lakes, everything. So what do we look at? Again, the same question, what do you look at when you study ecosystem ecology, or what do you mean by when you study ecosystems? What is that you look at? Productivity of the ecosystem. Very nice. Uh, that's a good answer. We do look at how productive is the ecosystem. What else? Community present in the territory, associated environmental factors. Yes, sort of. So, when you're looking at an ecosystem ecology, you're basically trying to know what all different types of ecosystems are present in an area, and what is the distribution of these ecosystems. And then you're trying to know how are the living and the non-living components of the ecosystem, they interacting with each other, as all of you have pointed out earlier. And you're trying to understand the ecosystem framework, and various functions. As Prem mentioned, the productivity of the ecosystem, we're trying to look at the food webs, how are the different organisms linked with each other, somebody is getting consumed or is consuming something else, and how are the nutrients getting cycled in these ecosystems, what are the various, water cycle, carbon cycle, how is all this happening within an ecosystem. This is what falls under the broad umbrella of ecosystem ecology. Moving on, so there are many different ecosystems that are found within India. So here you will see, if you start from Jammu Kashmir and and Arunachal Pradesh, you mostly find alpine forests. Moving a little down, there is Himachal Pradesh, there is Uttaranchal. These purple patches, these are mostly dry temperate grasslands or and cold. Uh, they have cold temperatures. Then you have these wet temperate forests. They are also found somewhere here, some patches in the Western Ghats of wet temperate forests in East India also. And then there are these tropical thorny forests or these shrublands, and also you can also call them grasslands. And these central India patches and all of this in lighter yellow, this is the dry deciduous forests, the tropical dry deciduous forests. These are the moist deciduous forests that are here in orange. And these are the most productive forests in India, the ones in light green, which are the tropical evergreen or the semi evergreen forests. So I just wanted to introduce you to the different ecosystems that are found in India. These are mostly the terrestrial ecosystems. There will also be many different aquatic ecosystems that are found in India, but this map basically shows you the terrestrial ecosystems. Moving on to biomes. So we all know by now that similar ecosystems or ecosystems that are similar to each other on the basis of their vegetation, on the soil, on the climate, on the type of wildlife that is found in those areas, they are categorized as biomes. So let's look at what are the different types of biomes that are found in this on this planet. So in this map you can see that there are around 8 different types of biomes, but there are, so people categorize them differently, so you can also find all other different categorizations of this. So I am basically presenting you this map which has mountains in dark blue, deserts in yellow, temperate rainforests are marked in a little bit of a brown, grasslands you can find here. Most part of Africa has grasslands, some parts of US, they are grasslands. Tropical rainforests, a lot of the Amazon rainforests, these are tropical rainforests. India and these Indian subcontinent, some parts of West Africa, these are the tropical rainforests. Temperate forests are found again in the US, in some parts of Europe, in some parts of East Asia. Taiga or the boreal forests are the forests that are mostly covered by snow. At like most of the year, they're covered by snow. And tundra, as you would all know, are polar, basically covered with ice. Most time of the, like all times of the year, they're covered with ice. So these are the different land biomes that are found in the on this planet. And something else would be the different aquatic biomes, the water habitats that are found on this planet. And these would include the freshwater ones, are the lakes and the rivers that are marked in a little bit of a green, some lakes here and there. Some rivers that are found everywhere on every continent. And then these purple ones are the different coral reefs that are found. These are also habitat to a lot of small fishes that live near these corals. Then there are these estuaries, and there are intertidal zones, basically the zones where the ocean meets the continents, the ocean pelagic and the abyssal zones, basically the deep water zones of the marine ecosystem. Okay, so I would like to point out here that the marine ecosystem, basically that forms around 97% of the entire aquatic habitat that is present on the planet, and the rest 3% is formed by the freshwater ecosystems, that is rivers and the lakes. Moving on. So, can you tell me what is biodiversity? How will you define biodiversity? Variety at all levels of life. Yes, that sort of clubs it all together. Very nice. So, biodiversity is basically the variety of life or the variety of species or variety in anything that you find at of life in all its forms at all the different levels of organization, flora and fauna in a habitat. Nice, yes. So the variety of life that you find in all of its forms at all of these different levels of organization. So, what are the major levels of biodiversity that were discussed during this week? What are the major levels of biodiversity? Genetic, species, and community. Halfway there. So yes, the three major levels of biodiversity that were discussed during these week were the genetic biodiversity, the species biodiversity, and the ecosystem biodiversity. So now we'll discuss this in a little bit of detail. So let's come to genetic biodiversity. Can you tell me what comes to your mind when you think about genetic biodiversity, or what is genetic biodiversity? Variation in genes, concerned with the genes within a particular species, biological variation. Yes, you're correct, Prem and Brunel. It's basically and Bhuvan is also correct, it's the diversity in the genetic makeup. So genetic diversity is when you're talking about the diversity in the genetic information that is present at various taxonomic levels. So as you mentioned, it could be the genetic diversity within an individual, it could be within a population, it could be at the species level, it could be it could be maximum, I think, at the species level. You cannot take genetic biodiversity further than that. So what is the genetic makeup of the individuals within a species? So how do you think do we measure genetic biodiversity? What are the two different forms in which we measure genetic biodiversity? And then we'll also discuss what these two different measures are. Polymorphism, yes. And the second one would be heterozygosity. Very nice. So, what is polymorphism? What do we mean when we say polymorphism, or what is the polymorphism that we observe? Anyone? What is polymorphism? Different forms at different times, 95% of all genes, difference appearance. Okay, sort of. So, polymorphism basically means the percentage or the proportion of genes that are represented in the population by more than one alleles. Okay, and we maximum proportion of the gene is 95%. Okay. Yeah, so 95% is what we take as the cutoff for discussing polymorphism. So you all would know that each gene has different alleles, right? For example, the height gene is discussed by a capital T and a small t. Basically, the individuals that will have capital T, they will be taller individuals, and the individuals that have small t will be shorter individuals in the P experiment that was done, and that is mostly taught for genes. So polymorphism is basically the proportion of genes that are represented in the population by more than one alleles. So does everybody understand this definition? Like, what does it mean by more than one alleles? So for one gene, like it was discussed in class about coat fur, coat color. So for the one coat color gene, there were multiple alleles that were coding for different levels of darkness of the coat color, right? And if these different alleles are present in more or less equal proportions, then you say that that this gene is polymorphic in the population. But if one of those alleles is present in like more than 95%, then you would say that this gene is monomorphic for this population. Is everybody getting what I'm trying to explain? If anybody has a doubt, you can. Okay, you're not getting it. So basically, so you understand till the point that a gene has multiple alleles, right? Yes, okay. So a gene has multiple alleles, and in a population, you can have all these different alleles for this particular gene, right? Yes. So when you're measuring how many alleles or which different alleles are present in this population, okay? So say this gene has five different alleles, okay? And if you are measuring what is the proportion of these five different alleles within the population, so if one of them comes out to be more than 95% in the population, then you would say that the population is monomorphic for that particular allele, or at that gene, since you only have that one particular allele which is dominating, so that population is monomorphic for that particular gene. Is it clear? Okay. Others, are you like sort of getting where I'm what I'm talking about? So if for that one particular gene, one allele is most common and the cutoff for that is 95%, then you say that that particular gene is monomorphic because mostly you only find that allele in the population. But if all those five alleles are more or less equally distributed within the population, then you would say that the population is polymorphic for that gene because different types of alleles and different types of phenotypes, therefore, are present in the population for that particular gene. Is it clear? Yes. Okay. Nice. Let's move on. Next is heterozygosity. Can you tell me what do we mean when we say that that an individual is heterozygous for a particular gene? What do you mean when we say that we are heterozygous for a particular gene? Shows contrasting character. Okay. So you would be aware that we are all diploids, right? At least humans are all diploids. Hana. So that basically means that for every gene, we have two alleles in our genetic makeup. And if these two genes that we have in our genetic makeup are the same, so if for height we have both the alleles as small t, or we have both of them as capital T, then we are said that we are homozygous for that particular gene. We are homozygous for the gene of height. But if some of us have our genetic makeup as capital T small t for height, then that means that we are heterozygous for height. Is it clear? If you have two different alleles for the same gene, yes, then you are heterozygous. So that's clear, right? So heterozygosity basically measures the proportion of genes, like so if you have a total 100 genes, say we mostly have a lot of genes, but for an example, say we have 100 genes in in humans, say humans have 100 genes. So in our population, if most of us are heterozygous for say 20 genes, then we would say the heterozygosity is 20 by 100. So the proportion of genes for which an average individual is heterozygous. Are you writing something on a notepad? If you are, then so I'm not writing anything on a notepad. I am not connected. I don't have something to connect it with. Yeah, I was just writing out for my own, like for explaining, but it's not visible, I know. So basically, heterozygosity means that the proportion of genes in the population for which an individual is heterozygous. Like most of the individuals are heterozygous for that number of genes. Is it clear? Yes. Others? Is the concept of heterozygosity and polymorphism clear? Okay, so we got a thumbs up from Laksha. So I guess it's clear to him also. Anybody have any doubt? Okay, so most of you understood this. What is genetic biodiversity? Very nice. So moving on, the sort of biodiversity that concerns ecologists the most would be the species biodiversity. And the three different measures for species biodiversity would be alpha diversity, beta diversity, and gamma diversity. So, like here, you can see this entire landscape, and here we choose this patch. So, if you're measuring the species biodiversity within a patch, that will be called alpha diversity. within this patch or within this patch or within this patch, these will be called alpha diversities. If you're comparing species diversity within two patches, that is called a species beta diversity, comparison of species diversity between two patches. And when we're talking about gamma diversity, it is the diversity of that we're measuring on the landscape level. So basically, it encompasses both alpha and beta diversity. So what is the diversity that you see across the entire landscape? So is this alpha, beta, gamma diversity clear to people, the concepts? Because somebody had also put up this doubt in the forum. Yes, yes. Okay. So if you are told to explain what are these three, can you please explain alpha diversity? Okay. So alpha diversity, basically say you have a patch of forest. So okay. Okay, for an example, you have a city which has multiple patches of forests in that city. Okay. But how to calculate it? Okay, yeah. So I will we will move on to calculations as well. Let me explain alpha diversity again. So for example, in a city you have multiple patches of mini forests. Okay. So if you're going out and measuring the diversity within one given patch of the forest, that will be called alpha diversity. And when you calculate alpha diversity of two different patches and then you're comparing the species diversity between these two patches, that is called beta diversity. So what is it will depend on the landscape. What sort of a landscape you have. So if it's forests that are interspersed with say agricultural patches, then you can consider that forest patch to be one single, unit of measurement that you're taking. And these will be interspersed by different agricultural fields. So these different forest patches can be your patch for alpha diversity. If it's a continuous forest, then you can divide patches say by a river which is flowing in between and will separate the two forests. Or the patch can also depend on how much of the plot that you are deciding that you are going to measure. So that particular patch will be your patch for which you are measuring the alpha diversity within that area. Is that okay? Afia? Is it's sort of clear? Okay. Okay, so let's move on. Next are the different measures of alpha biodiversity, as was asked by Prem. So there are two measures that were discussed in the lectures. One is the Simpson's Diversity Index, and the other is the Shannon Diversity Index. So the formula for the Simpson's Diversity Index is given here. It is 1 divided by the summation of the proportion of different species found in that area. So here, PI refers to the proportion of individuals belonging to that particular species, which can be measured by n divided by the capital N, where small n is the number of individuals belonging to this species, and capital N is the total number of individuals that are found in the area. Okay. So the for to calculate Simpson's biodiversity index, you basically what you do is D is equal to 1 divided by the sum of all these proportions ka square, sum of pi square. I is equal to 1 and S is the total number of species in that area. Say there are 10 species, so the pi square will go from the proportion of the first species ka square plus square of the proportion of the second species plus square of the proportion of the third species. So is that clear? And then there is the Shannon diversity index, which is the negative of the sum of pi multiplied by natural log of pi. Ln basically means log to the base of e of pi. So these are the two formulas. You can note them down because now we're going to perform an example exercise on this measures of alpha diversity. Can I change the slide? Have you guys noted down the formulae? Okay. So let's solve these examples. So first, let's solve the Simpson diversity and the Shannon diversity for the area 1. So basically, in area 1, we have these 5 different species. We have two of them are butterflies, two of them are grasshoppers, and one of them is a beetle. And this is the number of individuals present for each of these species. So you have small n for every species. So can you tell me what is the capital N? What is the capital N for area 1? Yeah, so what is the sum of all? It's not 12. 27. Yes. Nice. So 27 is the capital N. So looking at this formula again for the Simpson's diversity index, can you tell me what are we supposed to do now? With now we know what is small n, we know what is capital N. So what are we supposed to do now? What would be the first step to calculate D? Each species number over total. Very nice. So you will have to calculate small n over capital N for each of these species. So can you guys do that? Because then we'll move on. Like just note that down for yourselves because then we're gonna solve out what is uh, the different diversity indices. What would be the next step after having calculated n by capital N? 6 by 27, 5 by 27, 1 by 27, 3 by 27, 12 by 27. What is the next step? No, you will not be summing them up. No, this was tricky. So you're supposed to do something else before summing up the ratios. P square. Very nice, Mrinal. So first of all, you will do 6 by 27 square, 5 by 27 square, 1 by 27 square, 3 by 27 square, 12 by 27 square. Okay, so we'll take the square for each of these species and then we'll find out the sum. Okay, so can you guys please calculate that and let me know what you're getting after taking the square and then summing them up? I will also calculate it. Anybody who has calculated it, can you please put it in the chat box? 3.39. Can you please recheck that? Acha, uh, is 3.39 your final answer of D or is 3.39 your square and sum? I'm asking you to tell the summation of pi square. You have gone one step ahead. Yes, this is the final answer. Very nice, Sanvika. Can we, can some of you tell me what is the summation of pi square? Have all of you gotten the answer? Guys, have everybody solved this question? Or is it just Sanvika? Anybody else? Has nobody else solved the question? 0.29 for pi square. Yes, you are correct. Yeah, 0.27 is roughly there. It's 0.29, but yeah, it depends on how many uh, decimal points you'll be taking. And so the final answer you will reach to is what? Have others done it? Have others got it? Or is somebody struggling? If you've got the final answer of near 3.66, it's actually near 3.4 or 3.39, but I guess 3.66 is also okay. You can redo it once to see if you get it. It's mostly near 3.4, but that's fine. And if everybody have done this, now let's calculate the H for the same area, the Shannon Diversity Index. What would be the first step to do for the, yes, it is correct, Sabarish. What would be the first step to do for uh, calculating the Shannon Diversity Index for this LNPI? Okay, yeah. So, but to begin, even before that, you will need to calculate again, but we have done that, n by capital N. So, from that proportion, you will, yes, you'll calculate the natural log of pi. Then you will multiply it with pi and sum that all up. So, can you all tell me what you get from that? What is your answer from summation of pi ln pi? Meanwhile, I will also do that. Anybody who has solved summation of pi ln pi? Guys, anyone? What is the LNPI for the first one? Have you calculated? Any step, please let me know. Minus 1.51. It is close. It is not. Why are you giving me two different LN like summations? Minus 1.39. Yes, Sabarish, you're close. Minus 1.39 is the one that's close. But so anybody who's getting near minus 1.4 should be like, it's fine. So if you've calculated PI, LNPI, and you've gotten negative of 1.39 or whatever, the positive of that would be your H, which will be the Shannon Diversity Index. So for area 1, we have got the Simpson Diversity Index near 3.4 and the Shannon Diversity Index near 1.3 or 1.39, right? 1.37, 1.39, like that. So can we now do the same for the area number 2? You can all use your calculators for this, and if we'll be able to solve these few examples, it'll be nice because such questions do come up in competitive exams and other things, and you should know how to calculate the different diversity indices. It's helpful. So again, for this, we will first calculate the capital N, which will be, how much will be the capital N for this? 91. Yes. Yeah, 91. And now calculate small n by capital N for each of these species. You can make a table and then we can move forward from there. So it will be 12 by 91 square, 21 by 91 square, 5 by 91 square, plus 25 by 91 square. So I know it takes a little bit, like it's a long process to do all this on a calculator, but I would like you all to give it a try so that we know that we have understood how these different diversity indices are calculated. So, what do we get when you do 12 by 91 square? I think you would be getting 0.017. Then we'll calculate 21 by 91 square. Did everybody get 0.017 for 12 by 91 square? Yes. Very good. You can take all your numbers to like 3 decimals or 2 decimals. Yeah, so 0.0169. Yes, so you can just round it off to 3 decimal places, 0.017. 0.19 is for what? Rupesh, can you tell me what you have written 0.19 for? Like, what is this the answer to? Pi square. Sum of the pi square, is it? Yes, you're almost correct. It is close by. It is 0.18. So 0.19 is also close. Did everybody get this answer? Did everybody get their pi square summation? Final answer is 5.14. The final answer that I have got is around 5.5. So it is, I would say, close by. 1 by zero point 0.18. Yeah, it should be around 5.5, right? If you're getting 0.19 also. Okay, it's 5.2. Fine. So now let's also calculate the. Has everybody. Does anybody have any doubts in this calculation? If yes, you can please raise your hand or let me know. Otherwise, we'll move forward and we'll calculate the H for the same data set, and then we'll compare the two data sets, the two areas, area 1 and area 2. 5.4, yes, that is correct. Now, to calculate the uh, Shannon index, we'll need to calculate again the natural log of pi. You all know pi by now. You've calculated your small n by capital N. You just need to define the natural log and then multiply it by the pi again, and then you'll get the Shannon index. If anybody has any doubt, please let me know. And guys who have calculated, please put it in the chat box. What is your answer for the Shannon index? Is P.97? Which P? For which are you talking about, Mrinal? Okay. Why are you calculating the summation of just P? Would you not need the summation of P along with the natural log? Like you'll need to calculate Pi multiplied by ln Pi and then sum over all of them. Or are you summing and then multiplying? Guys, have you got your answers for summation of Pi multiplied by ln Pi minus 1.52? That's close. What I have is around minus 1.7. But I guess it varies a lot with depending on the number of decimal places you're taking. So I guess it's fine. So your H would be around 1.5, right? So if you has everybody reached this point? Should we move on? Yeah, it's close, Laksha, 1.7. Yes. So if you now compare the two areas, so for area A, you had your Simpson's diversity as 3.4, and for area B, you have a Simpson's diversity around 5.5. So it's obvious that the area B or the area 2 is more diverse. It has a higher biodiversity. But that is obvious also from here, as you can see that the number of species anyway found in this area is larger than the number of species found in this area, right? And the again and also the Shannon diversity index is also greater for area number 2. Now by looking at these numbers for these different species, what would you say are these, which of these areas is even and which is uneven, or do you think both of them are even or both of them are uneven when it comes to species evenness? What do you think about these two areas by just looking at their species, the number of individuals? Area 1 is even, both are uneven, both. Yeah, I would also think that both of them are sort of uneven. We can calculate the evenness as well. As you would have seen in the lecture, for the evenness, the formula was E is equal to the the Simpson's index divided by the number of species in that area, D by D max. Yes, and D max is basically the number of species in the given area. And the evenness for the Shannon index would be H by H max, where H max will be the natural log of the number of species in the area. So if we compare both of them based on their Simpson's index evenness, then it would come out to be 3.4 divided by 5. And this one would be 5.59 divided by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right. So what do you get when you calculate that? So both of their numbers lie close by. The evenness for area 1 calculated from the Simpsons index comes out to be 0.68. Is everybody getting that? 3.4 divided by 5. And for area 2, it's coming out to be 0.79. So you would say both of these areas are even or uneven? Yes. What is the yes for? Is it for Even or uneven? So we thought that both the areas, they are uneven for the species, but from our calculations they are not very uneven, because for them, the at least for the Simpsons index, the evenness lies above zero point 0.5. So we would have to believe that they are not very uneven also in that matter. But from the numbers that we look at, they seemed uneven, right? Is that clear to everybody? Can you please write the answers of all the indices of both examples and unevenness? Okay. Is it okay if while uploading the slides, I will put down the answers and then upload them? Can you take a look then? Or do you want me to write them down right now? It's okay, right? So, okay. Before uploading these slides, I will definitely add in the answer solutions for both of them. Okay. So, so now you would have gotten some idea of how to calculate both these indices. So, I think we should move on. It's not very difficult, but it's just a little bit lengthy. So, coming to another important concept, it's the species accumulation. Where would you upload the slides? Have you not received the link? There is the drive links. We all of the tutors, they are giving the drive link of the slides that they're uploading. I think you can check out the NPTEL resources, because we are uploading all the YouTube links of these recorded tutorials as well as the slides that we are showing during the tutorials. You haven't got that. Okay, I will check it and I will get back to you. I think you should like write to one of the uh, NPTEL people, because we have been uploading our, or maybe you will get it in some time. We have been uploading all our slides and the videos. Okay, so can you tell me what is the species accumulation curve? What do you have on the x-axis? What do you have on the y-axis? Number of species we watch versus the effort in hours. Yes. So that's correct. Basically, the species accumulation curve is a graph of the number of species that you find or that you record, the cumulative number of species in an environment as a function of the sampling effort. So, the number of hours you spend. Or what if you are measuring the number of species by doing some sort of a capture method, say mist netting for birds. So, the number of species that you capture while mist netting plotted against the number of hours you spent while doing that in the field. So, here in this image, you can see these two different types of accumulation curves. So, in this, the one with the hollow circles, you will notice that probably you would say that the sampling effort here has been adequate as the graph has plateaued. So, what basically happens is when you go out to a new ecosystem, say to a forest or to a field, and you're observing the species there, on the first day, you will observe many new species, because that is your first day, that is when you're starting out. So, say you observe, so you went out birding one day across wherever you live, say in a field or in the campus, or if you live in a city, so say you went birding in a nearby park. So, on the first day, you observed some five species. Then the next day you went again and you carried out birding for 1 more hour. The next day, your sampling effort would now be double. From 1 hour, it will be 2 hours. And now, say you found one new species, five which you saw on day one, and one new species you saw on day two. And then on subsequent days, say you keep seeing newer species each day. So you see two new species, then you don't see any new species, and on the next day you again see some new species. But eventually, what do you think will happen? Eventually, if you keep going for say 10 days, you will stop seeing any new species, because you have covered all the species that are found in the area. You have recorded all of them already. So that is what is meant by plotting a species accumulation curve. By this, we get to know the species richness of this area. So how many species you find in the area. So if the curve plateaus, that is, it flattens out, that means that you have sampled enough and you will not find any new species now, or you are unlikely. It does not mean you will not, it's you're unlikely to find new species. And in the ones with the black dots, you see that it's not reached an asymptote yet. So it means that your accumulation curve has not flattened out, and you might find newer species if you spend more hours sampling. Is this clear? Okay, it's clear to Afia. Yes. Nice. So let's move on. So, ecosystem biodiversity. By ecosystem biodiversity, we mean that we're looking at what are the variety of different ecosystems that are found in that area, in that entire landscape, say, and how are they distributed? What is the distribution of these different ecosystems? So, in this image, you'll see that there are many different ecosystem patches found in this landscape. So here you have grasslands where you can see cattle's grazing. Here you can see some butterflies also, some eagles also in this area. And then if you move on, there are these natural forests, that is, these are undisturbed forests that are not planted by humans. And there's a patch of plantations, the artificial forests, and there is this edge between the grasslands and the forested areas. Then if you move on, you'll also find some areas with these some fields. There are these, this river is flowing here, there are some agricultural rice fields here. So you find a lot of different ecosystems in this one landscape. So you would see that the ecosystem biodiversity of this area is not high. It depends on which what you're comparing it with, but there are multiple ecosystems found in this particular zone. Versus if you compare it with another area in which all of this is mostly covered by the artificial plantation and some patches of natural forest. So that area will have a lower ecosystem diversity as compared to this area, because it has more number of different types of ecosystems found in a given area, like in a given landscape. Okay, so moving on. Now let's talk about biodiversity hotspots. Do you all know what are biodiversity hotspots? Endemism, high species richness. Yeah, these are some of the characteristics of high diversity hotspots. Threat, yes. So, biodiversity hotspots are basically areas or zones that have a high species richness. You find a lot of different species in these areas. They have high endemism. Most of these species are just specialized to this area. They will not be found anywhere else in the entire world. And there is this, they have a higher threat also, because since they're only found in this zone, in this specialized area, if this area is destroyed, or if there is a, also there are temperature and moisture, these abiotic factors that impact the species there, the resources, this also impacts the species distribution in the area. So if any of these factors are impacted, say by humans, by anthropogenic activity, by climate change, any of this, these species might face a severe threat. Can you name some of the biodiversity hotspots that are found in India? There are four major biodiversity hotspots that are found in India. Do you all know? Himalayas, yes, very nice.
Western Ghats,
Western Ghats, yes. Sundaland, yes, and the Indo-Burma, yes. These are the four different biodiversity hotspots that are found in India. The Western Ghats, they have a lot of many endemic birds, insects, a lot of these species that are only found in this Western Ghat zone. For example, you would have heard of the Nilgiri langur, say for example. It's mostly found only in this zone. And there are many such species that are found only in particular areas that would be affected if anything happens were to happen to this area, if there was deforestation, if there was climate change, anything like that. So biodiversity hotspots are very important to maintain, and they are characterized by high species richness, high degree of endemism, and high degree of threat. So moving on, what do you think makes some areas more biodiverse than others? So, we will discuss a few hypotheses that were discussed during the week that tell us why do we think some of these areas are more biodiverse than the others. So, moving to the first one, which is the evolutionary speed hypothesis. Can you tell me what does this state? What does the evolutionary speed hypothesis state? Gets more time to evolve, yes. And there's one more factor that it states. So, areas that are more biodiverse, they may have gotten more time to evolve, or the evolution speed is higher, or they have rapid evolution in that area. So, when you're comparing two areas and you're wondering why one of them is more biodiverse than the other, it might be because one of them formed earlier. If you're talking about, say, an island patch or say a forest patch in an area. So maybe one of them was formed earlier as compared to the other, and it has gotten more time. The species living in that area have gotten more time to evolve, and hence they have more biodiversity. Or it could be that in a certain patch, the speed of biodiversity of evolution is higher. That could be because of competition, or the evolution could be because of changing conditions that require rapid evolution by the species living in that area. Now, the second hypothesis is the geographical area hypothesis. Can you tell me what this one states? What is the haven't completed the third lecture fully, so no. Okay, fine. Frame. And anybody else? What is the do not get drastically changed over time? What do not get drastically changed over time? Can you please elaborate, Mirinal? I did not understand what you're trying to say. Does anybody know what does the geographical area hypothesis state? Okay, that's not Afia, you're not on the correct path. What you're saying is somewhat related to again the evolutionary hypothesis, because if there are more genetic mutations, it means there's more evolution in that area. Geographical area hypothesis is very simple. It basically just says if there is a larger area, then that is supposed to be more, that is like, that will be probably more biodiverse because it has a larger area, so it can occupy more number of species. Sorry, it can not occupy, it can handle, or it can give space to a more number of species. And the second factor is physically or biologically complex habitat structure. If some area has the habitat structure which is more complex, say it has a canopy, then it has a mid canopy, then it has shrubs, then it has ground litter. So this habitat structure is more complex if you compare it with a place that just has a huge canopy and no understory growth. So, if a habitat structure is complex in a given area, it would offer more niches. There are more areas that the species can occupy. Somebody could be a canopy feeder, it is feeding only in the canopy, does not come down. Then somebody is in the mid canopy, it is searching for food there, searching for insects in that area. Then somebody is eating the insects off of the vines or the climbers, and somebody is searching for insects on the ground, or somebody for looking for grains on the ground. So the habitat which is more complex biologically and physically, it will offer different niches that can be occupied by more number of species, and hence that will be more biodiverse than the other ecosystem which is less complex. Is this clear? Is the geographical area hypothesis clear? The two hypothesis comparison between the first and the second one, is it? Yeah, so the evolutionary speed hypothesis is just stating that if you're comparing two areas and you're comparing the biodiversity in these areas, So the one which has had more time to evolve. Say there are two islands, one of them formed earlier and the other one has just formed because of some volcanic activity. So the one that formed earlier would have had more time to evolve, right, than the one that just formed. Or say there was this afforestation done by the government in some area recently, and if you compare the biodiversity in the freshly afforested area as compared to the area that has been a forest for a long time, so this freshly afforested area will have lower diversity as compared to the primary forest. Why? Because that has had a long amount of time to evolve, and the fresh area has just had a small time. So the time for evolution is longer, so it will mean that there is more biodiversity, and if the speed at which evolution is happening in that area. So an example that was given in the lecture was that if some area has some radioactive substance, so the speed of evolution or mutation will be higher in that area. So these two factors, according to the evolutionary speed hypothesis, these two factors influence the biodiversity. But when you come to geographical area hypothesis, the two factors according to this hypothesis that affect biodiversity is the area is larger in space as compared to the other one. So the larger area will have more biodiversity, or if the area that has a physically and biologically complex structure, that will be more biodiverse as compared to an area that is simpler in its habitat structure. Is that clear? Okay, moving on. The third one is the interspecific interaction hypothesis. Can any of you tell me what does this one state? Now, the earlier two hypotheses were mostly talking about the landscape. Like, so it has been formed for a long time and this and that. This one is talking about the interaction that it has with other species or with the organisms of the same species. Interaction between different species. Yes. So that is what interspecific interaction mean. But do you know what this hypothesis states? So, what this hypothesis is basically states is that you will find more biodiversity in areas that have a higher competition and also in areas that have a higher predation. So, by competition, it means that if in an area, uh, say there is a tree, okay, and it is a fruiting tree, and multiple species of birds they come there and they feed on this tree. So because some species see that okay, these other species are going to the tree to eat fruits, there might be more resources and they all rush to the tree. Say now there are 5 6 species of birds feeding on the same tree, so you will of course see that now there is competition among these different species, and so some of them will have to adapt to a slightly different diet based on the if they have to stay in the same zone. So they will adapt to, so if there's competition between the species, some of them will adapt to say eating the flower, getting nectar from there. Some of them will adapt to eating the insects that are present on the tree. Some of them will adapt to eating the leaves of the tree. So basically, that is how they avoid competition as they change their resources that they feed on. So, an area where the species are facing competition, they will evolve and they will adapt to different things, and you'll find more biodiversity. And if you find predation in an area, that will also help increase in biodiversity. How? If there are multiple species that are competing for the same resource, say species A, B, and C, they're competing for the same resource, for the same plant, for example, they're herbivores. They're competing for the same plant, for the grass, and all of them eat. But species B is a very fast eater. It will eat all of the grass and will leave very few resources for the other ones. Then that would mean that the species B is going to outcompete the other two and they might go extinct. But if there is predation now, if there's a tiger who is going to consume these herbivores, then since species B is higher in number because they could consume the resources faster, and species A and C are lower in number, the tiger is more likely to encounter the species B and eat it and prey on it more frequently as compared to A or C. And this will in turn, it will balance the numbers of species A, B, and C. Is that clear? Any doubts here? Others, is it clear to everybody? Should we move on? Okay. So, moving on, we come to the ambient energy hypothesis. Do you know what this one states? Anyone? What is the ambient energy hypothesis? More available energy leads to more biodiversity. Yes, that is correct. Very nice, Adit. So basically, this hypothesis is pretty simple. It just states that if there is more energy, if there is more productivity in a given area, then that will be more biodiverse, because if there is more productivity, of course, it can accommodate more species that are going to feed upon those producers. And if the conditions are more favorable in a particular zone, then that zone is going to be more biodiverse in the other zones. So by this ambient energy hypothesis, you can compare the temperate and the tropical zones. So you would see that the tropical part of Earth has more biodiversity as compared to the northern temperate zones or the poles, right? That is because the tropical part receives much more sunlight. It is higher in productivity. There are many different types of plants and animals in this area, many different types of plants which can accommodate more and more different species of fauna as well in this area. And the conditions also in the tropical zone will be more favorable, because the temperature is okay, and the humidity is also nice in this area, as compared to areas like the temperate areas which have harsh winters, or even further than that, which have winters all throughout the year. So those areas will be less biodiverse, because they have these harsher climatic conditions as compared to the other areas which have more favorable conditions. Is that okay? Is that clear? Should we move on to the last hypothesis? Yeah. So the last hypothesis is the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Can any of you tell me what does the intermediate disturbance hypothesis state? It is actually pretty clear from its heading only, but yeah. Very nice, Adit. Yes, low disturbance or high disturbance leads to loss in biodiversity. So you will find less biodiversity in areas where there is high disturbance. For example, think of a forest, and say humans are now going to encroach on that forested area. Either they're going to build roads, or they're going to cut it down for agricultural purposes, or they just go in there for hunting and poaching. That is of course going to lead to a decline in the biodiversity, as the species are going to get killed, either because of habitat loss or because of the hunting and poaching that is being carried out. If there are very low levels of disturbance, that means that there is no disturbance at all. So the species eventually, so in this case, competitive exclusion can function. If those three herbivores, A, B, and C, were not affected by anything, there was not even a predator that was affecting them, there was very low disturbance, then of course B is going to win. A and C are going to get competitively excluded. In very low levels of disturbance, also, other factors will work, and they will lead to homogeneity of the habitat. Homogeneity means that, like, one species is found throughout the habitat. Basically, the diversity is low in that area. Okay. So moving on, coming to some of the last points that were covered in the lectures, the how do you calculate the economic value of a biodiversity? So economic value of biodiversity can be of, like, the economic value can be further divided into two types: use value and non-use value. Can you tell me what is use value and non-use value? Just by looking at the terms, you would be able to guess what do we mean by use value and non-use value. Anyone? So use value here basically means what value you can get from the biodiversity by using it for some purpose or the other. And non-use value is the value that you can associate with the biodiversity when you are not using it, when you're not utilizing it for anything. And use value can be further divided into direct use. For example, you're going and you're directly, yeah, commercial usage, yes, that would fall under the direct use value. So direct use would be when you're directly going inside the forest and you're using it. For example, there can be a consumptive use, which means that you're going and you're collecting timber, you're collecting non-timber forest produce, you're collecting medicinal plants. That is a consumptive value of the forest. You can get all these things. And what does all of this cost? That would be the value of that biodiversity. It is called consumptive because once you have used it, you cannot use it again. It's like gone from there. If you've cut those trees, you cannot again go and cut the same trees. You have used them up, right? So that is what is referred to as consumptive. Non-consumptive is the sort of usage like if you go, this is the value that you can associate with the biodiversity. If you go and you enjoy yourself for the recreation purposes, you go on a safari, you look at a tiger, and you are happy that you saw this biodiversity. That is a non-consumptive value. Different people can go and look at the same flora and fauna, and they can derive the same value from it. So this is non-consumptive. Indirect use, indirect would mostly be that you're not really using the area, but you know that it's there, right? You can look at it and you can be happy. So that is the indirect value of that uh, biodiversity. And optional value is basically what means by saying that there is an option, that it is present out there, that you can utilize it at some point in your life. So having that option that you can use it at some point is also a value that you can assign with the biodiversity. And now moving on to the non-use value, where you don't really use them. So existence value. Indirect value also comes with other advantages. Basically, if there's a forest, it has various ecosystem services that it serves for us. So a forest acts as watershed protection. Watershed protection means that the trees, they're binding the soil together, right? And if it rains heavily, that soil is going to absorb all the water. It is not going to erode. So that is one of the watershed protection. The trees, they act as carbon sinks. They absorb a lot of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They act as sinks, and this carbon gets sequestered. There is a lot of nutrient cycling that is happening in these forests, and a lot of these water cycles and the other geochemical cycles that happen. So this is the indirect services that we're getting from the forest, but we don't really realize them unless we are, unless we read about them or we get to know about them. So indirect are the ones that the forest is the ecosystem services that we're getting from the forest, right? Now coming to the non-use value. Non-use value is where you're not using the biodiversity per se. You're not using it for any purpose. Existence, you are just, this was here where you say that you're just happy that this forested area exists. You look at that and you are, and that is the value of the forested area. You look at it and you get happy that okay, nice, there's this area. So when you go and you buy, so say for example you're living in a resort. If that resort has different views, if you have a forest view cabin versus if you have a normal road view cabin, you would obviously prefer a forest view cabin, and it will be charged higher also. It will be more expensive than the one that does not have a nice view, that just has a city view. So that is one value that is assigned to the biodiversity. Then there is altruistic, which means that some people, we know some people out there have their jobs that are related to the forest. They are forest officers, or there are people working, there are researchers working out there in the forest that get their they get their uh, what do you call that, they get their livelihood from the forest. There are tribes living in the forest who also collect all these medicinal plants and everything, and they are getting their livelihood from the forest, or they are totally dependent on the forest for their lifestyle. So altruistic means that you know that if not you, somebody else is using the forest, and so you know that it is useful to somebody. And bequest is basically leaving what the forest what is the value of the forest if you're leaving it behind for the for the generations to come. So we are always taught that we should leave behind some of these resources for our generations to come, for our children and then children of our children, grandchildren, all of that. So bequest is the value that can be associated for the future generations for the biodiversity. Okay, so these are some of the economic values and some methods by which you can measure the evaluation. You can evaluate the value of the biodiversity. Is number one would be the market prices. So do you know what is the market price method? What is the hedonic price method? What is the travel cost method? Can any of you tell me what are these three methods? Anyone? What is the uh, what would you guess if I tell you that what is the market price method of a biodiversity of, say, a forest? Yes, it's the forest resources and their economic value. So basically, you're extracting all these forest resources as we discussed. We're getting timber, we're getting non timber produce, we're getting medicinal plants. So, what is the market value? What is the economic value of all these different resources that we're extracting out of the forests? That entire market value would be the market price of that biodiversity. Now, the what is the hedonic pricing method? Anyone? No idea. Okay. Hedonic pricing method is basically it's the value that you associate with the biodiversity because you are happy to look at it. Because you're just happy that it exists. You like it in your neighborhood. You like being around such an area which has a high biodiversity. So in general, um, you would opt for an area which is more green than an area which has just chimneys and all these big buildings around it, right? So that is the hedonic pricing method. What value you associate with the biodiversity when you are happy looking at it. And the travel cost method is the amount of money that people spend in going to the biodiversity rich area, in going to forests, in going to, say, rivers, lakes, all these areas, and in enjoying them. What is the amount of money that they spend in their travel, in their stay in these areas? That is the amount of value that you can associate with the biodiversity because people are going to enjoy that only in that area. Okay. Circumstantial valuation would mean what is the so there are two sorts of costs that are associated with circumstantial valuation. One is the damage cost, one is the replacement cost. So damage cost basically means, say for example, you destroyed a patch of forests or along a hill, and now because of that destruction, there is soil erosion and there are landslides. So there is damage caused because of the absence of that forest area. So what it costs us to um to cover all those damages, what costs us to cover all those damages which were initially would not have happened if there was the biodiverse or the forest area in that zone. That is the damage cost associated. And the replacement cost is if you want to replace that forest, say with something else, then what is it that costs us while, so if you have a forest and you want to cut it down, but you don't even want to get the landslides that are going to happen in the absence of the forest, so you want to cover it up with something else, say with some fabric of some sort. You want to cover all that up so that the soil remains in its area and it does not come out, it does not erode. So what is the cost, what will it cost you to replace that forest with something else to serve the same function? That is called the replacement cost. Okay. And survey or the willingness to pay is basically when you're just asking people, when the government is asking people, how much are you willing to pay to save this patch of forest? Say, for example, you have to, pay it out of your taxes for the government to maintain that patch of forest. So, how much are the people willing to pay to keep that particular patch of biodiversity around them? That is the survey or the willingness to pay. So, is this clear? Any doubts, anybody? Okay. So we have mostly covered everything that was taught this week, more or less, the broad ideas that were taught this week. So thank you everyone. And if anybody has any doubts, I'm here. You can ask me, we can clarify them. And if people don't have any doubts, you can leave the meeting as well. I have one curiosity. Yes, please go ahead. Yes, I was telling you that the YouTube link will be shared. I will further ask the NPTEL people why are these links not being shared to you guys, because we have been submitting all the links for all the three tutorials as well as the presentations that we have been using for them. So, yes, you will get the YouTube link as well. So, here, which YouTube link are you asking for? This same talk or some like previous tutorial session? How evolutionary factors affect ecosystem. So are you asking about, can you send the drive link? Okay. Yes, I can send you the drive link. One second. I will do that and then I will this talk as well as the previous ones. Okay. Okay. I will share it with you guys. Okay. And as far as the drive link is concerned, just give me 1 minute. I will share it in 1 minute right now. And can you give me 1 minute, Prem? I'll just answer your question after I have shared that drive link with everyone. Okay. So this is the drive link to the folder where I will be uploading my presentations. But for the other ones, you will have to. Uh, you will have to. I think check with the NPTEL people. They have been sharing them all with you guys. Okay. So yes, Prem, we were talking about how evolutionary factors affect the ecosystem. So, in what sense are you asking how evolutionary factors affect ecosystem? There are a lot of ways in which an evolutionary factor will affect an ecosystem. First of all, you would say that there was a barren patch of land, right, where eventually ecological succession will happen. So that is the entire ecological succession is also an evolution of sorts, which is going on, and this will convert the barren patch of land uh, into a primary forest, say for example, right? Because over the years it will evolve and it will form a forest. There will be trees now, because if you know, the ecological succession starts with, say, lichens, mosses, and then small grasses, then shrubs, and then you get trees. So that is one way in which the forming of an ecosystem is affected by evolution. And then how is the ecosystem composition affected? Say for example, there is a population of deers living in that ecosystem, and as we discussed, there are a lot of factors how it is affected. That population of deer in particular can be affected. For example, say if there's a particular parasite, okay, that started parasitizing the trees on which these deer feed. So the trees will now go down in number, and these deer will eventually have to shift their resources to some other sort of a plant. So they will have to evolve. Only those particular herbivores will survive in that ecosystem, which will be able to evolve and switch their diet to some other diet. That is one way in which the ecosystem composition, the community composition will be affected, right? And say for example, there are two insect populations out there, A and B. So the population A is preferred by the predator, and it is so the predator will obviously, the say it's a bird, the bird will obviously prefer the population A, and it will try to always capture the individuals from A. But now the insect A, the population starts going down because more and more predators have been feeding on it. So now the predator will have to switch its diet and start eating B. And so the amount of insects, the species A that had gone down, will now revive, and the amount of B will start going a little down. And then when they will reach an equilibrium, they will be living in that ecosystem. So, what other evolutionary factors are you asking? So, there are a lot of ways in which they can affect, but if there's something particular in your mind, I can answer that. Can we link disturbance with the cause of genetic drift and further variation, mutation, speciation, evolution? Yes, Prem, go ahead. Mutation. Okay, that those causes you're saying mutation, gene flow, genetic drift, natural selection. Yes, these are some of the evolutionary processes that in general occur that happen in an ecosystem. So mutation would be if of these natural selection is clear to me. So you understand these four processes, how these evolutionary processes they affect different populations. Is it? Oh, out of all these, only natural selection is clear to you. Okay. So basically, what happens in mutation is say there is a population of say there is a population of insects that in general thrives in a particular park. Okay, but one of them got mutated, and it is now some of them got mutated, and they now camouflage well with their background, so they will not be eaten up by their predators, right? And eventually the morphology of the insect population is going to change because the other ones that were not able to camouflage with their background, they will be selectively eaten up by the predators, and these ones will thrive, and they will leave behind more progeny, and that is how that particular population will change over time, right? Is that clear? Yes. Okay. What is gene flow? Gene flow basically means the amount. So, say there are two populations, there are two neighboring forest patches, and the birds between these two forest patches they exchange with each other, and there is gene flow in these two patches, right? And so, the bird population here and the bird population there, they are interbreeding, and there is a regular gene flow. But say after some time, a highway is built through, and now the birds don't like going upon that all that traffic noise, and these ones just stay in this zone, and these ones stay the in their own patch, they don't intermingle, right? So now the gene flow is cut down. So within one particular population you will start observing inbreeding depression. So are you aware of the term inbreeding? So if Yes, so you will start observing inbreeding depression, and eventually these fatal genes or these genes that are negatively impacting the population, they will start to accumulate more and more and more in this population. And both of these populations can eventually, they will not be able to, if there was a gene flow, there was an active gene flow, and that population was say immune to some particular disease, then this also would have been eventually immune to that disease because there is a gene flow, and some of their genes that are making them immune to those particular diseases, they are also getting incorporated in this population. But eventually if the gene flow is stopped, the all this population is going to face an inbreeding depression, and if that disease spreads, the entire population might go extinct because of that. So a gene flow is very important, right? Is that clear? Is gene flow also clear? Yes. And the last is genetic drift. So genetic drift basically means that if how do I explain this? If say there are two particular genes in a population, right? But although we are different in many attributes across the globe because of gene flow, we are one species. Yes, that is true. So Yeah, I was wondering how to explain genetic drift to you. Give me a minute. I will just check something. So basically, genetic drift would mean that if there's a population, right, and if that is a small population, then if the gene composition, say, was A and B, there were two different alleles for that particular gene. So eventually, because that is a small population, some of that, so one of those two genes might get fixed in the population. So say now all of them will just have AA on both the alleles, and the B will get eliminated over time. So if there are two different alleles for a gene and one of them is higher in the frequency and the other one is lower, eventually over time they might get drifted and one of them will be fixated and the other one will get eliminated from the population. And that might happen just because of a random chance. It is not because of any of the reasons. It just happened because of chance. A might have gotten fixed, B might have gotten fixed, but any of them, like one of them gets fixed, or like the basically the genetic composition of the population changes over time just because of chance. Any significant cause, the variation of genetic frequency is greatly affected, like natural disasters. Yes, the variation in genetic frequency. Yeah, what you're saying is correct. So, are these things clear to you now? Yes. Okay. Any other doubts? Any other discussions? People? I think someone, Afia was asking earlier, can we link disturbance with the cause of genetic drift, further variation, mutation, speciation? I did not really understand your question. Can you please either rephrase it or if it's clear from this previous discussion? I mean, can I significantly say that the disturbance hypothesis is somehow explained? Okay. So, what the disturbance hypothesis basically said that not more disturbance and not low disturbance. So, if you have a, so you're saying, so how is the disturbance hypothesis going to explain all this? I still did not understand. So, the disturbance hypothesis just says that if some area is highly disturbed, it will have a low biodiversity. And if some area has very low disturbance, that will also have low biodiversity. Intermediately disturbed area will have the highest biodiversity. How do you want to link it with genetic drift and speciation? Okay, yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about the same thing, I think. So basically you're saying if some area is highly disturbed and the population is getting reduced in the size, so eventually they are going to face something of a, say, genetic drift, and they're going to bottleneck in speciation. How speciation? Extinction, no, after that, if there is like, in what she is saying, the biodiversity, there's loss, there's variation loss, and if there's drift, one of them might get fixed, and if this fixed gene is not able to protect them from different things, then these species might get extinct, right? And that is how that is going to lead to a loss of diversity. You're saying there's a high disturbance, then that is going to lead to a bottleneck effect. So if you're saying there's a high disturbance, the species population has been cut down to only a few individuals now, and that is going to lead to a founder sort of an effect. And the genetic composition of these founder individuals is now going to be the genetic composition of all the entire population. Is that what you're saying, Brindle? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think Afia, I would like read up more about this, and I will get back to you if that's okay. Yeah, so you will get the drive link for every module after the thing is done. So since like only the 1 week of videos have been done, you will get the drive link only of those. You get the YouTube link of those videos and the link of the slides to that video. See, subsequent slides you'll get after the tutorial session is done. Is that okay? Okay. Uh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. You can all. Okay, I will just end this meeting now. I think it's done. Bye bye.